Hello again. As you know, I am Eli, and this is the beginning of the A plus track. So in this class today, we are going to be giving you an overview of what the A plus certification is, why you should care about it, if you should care about it, and give you an idea of what this track is going to be like on EliTheComputerGuy.com. So the A plus is a certification from an organization called CompTIA A. The big important thing to understand about CompTIA A is that generally their certifications are vendor neutral. So when you're in the IT field, when you're in the tech field, and you go out for certifications, most of the time the certifications that you're going to get are based around a particular vendor. So the MCSE or the MCSA, that is all about Microsoft products. The CCNA, CCNP, CCIE, that's all about Cisco products. Now, when you go and you study for those exams and you take those certifications, you may learn kind of, sort of, a little bit about different products, right? So when you go for your MCSE, you'll learn a little bit about Linux or a little bit about Unix, but really they're only teaching you just enough in order to be able to use those products within a Microsoft world. You're not really learning very much about those products at all. The important thing to understand with the CompTIA world is that they are generally vendor neutral. So when you go in to take these tests, you'll be learning about Microsoft, and you'll be learning about Mac, and you'll be learning about Linux. It's no one particular individual vendor. Now, for the A plus certification, this is basically targeting the desktop support people. So in the IT world, you have multiple tiers. The first tier is the help desk folks, right? The people that pick up the phone when the users are complaining. They essentially take all the notes, and then somebody else goes out to try to fix the problem. The people that try to go out to fix the problem are generally the desktop support people. So desktop support people, they're the ones that literally they swap the hard drives, they swap graphics cards, they install operating systems, they update computers, so on and so forth. So that's basically the target that we're going after here. Now, one of the important things that we need to say, and one of the misconceptions, is that the A plus in general is not a prerequisite for anything else, right? So when you go out there and you're looking for IT boot camps, a lot of the IT boot camps and a lot of the ways that the A plus is sold is that you get your A plus, and then you get your Net plus, and then you get your MCSA or MCSE, and then you get your CCNA. And so there's an idea that the A plus is a prerequisite for the Net plus, which is a prerequisite for the Microsoft certifications, so on and so forth. It is important to understand that the A plus is generally, not that I know of at least, a prerequisite for anything. So you don't have to have your A plus in order to get your MCSE. You can jump right into the MCSE. Additionally, you don't have to have your Net plus in order to jump into the CCNA. So the good part about the A plus and Net plus and the other CompTIA certifications is that they are vendor neutral, and so they relate to a lot of vendors' products. But one of the things, again, one of the big misconceptions that people have is that you need these certifications to go on. So the sad part is a lot of people, because again, certifications will take you a lot of time to get. Again, even if you understand computers and technology already, studying for a test is just going to take you a lot of time, and it's going to cost you a reasonable amount of money. So a lot of people get confused and they waste time and money by getting something like the A plus because they think that it's a prerequisite when in reality it's not. If you want to get the A plus, that's fine, but just realize you can learn this material and then jump to the next certification without actually having to get the A plus. So the big question is really, what is the A plus for, right? You're young, you're a noob, you want to jump into the IT field, and you're thinking, what is the A plus for? And it's important to understand with any certification that all of these certifications are created for specific reasons. For if you get the MCSA or the MCSE, you're learning how to manage the Microsoft ecosystem. If you get your CCNA, you're learning how to manage Cisco type equipment. So the big question before you get any certification is you have to be thinking about what is this certification actually for. And so the A plus, as I said in the last little bit, is for basic PC maintenance and configuration. Basic. We're not getting into Active Directory here. We're not getting into SANs and cloud networking and all of that kind of stuff. This is the basic type things that you're going to be dealing with. So basically swapping and installing RAM, being able to build a computer, being able to swap hard drives, understanding how cooling works in a computer, understanding how the power supply works, that types of thing. We're going to be talking about installing operating systems, but basically, again, just installing the operating system. So how to install the operating system, how to make sure that device drivers are installed properly, how to install firmware, those type of things. So we're talking about that base level. So again, we're talking about desktop support. If you haven't been into the real enterprise world, essentially this is where a secretary or a CEO sits down at their computer, they go to log in, and then the screen just goes black. Nothing happens. And so that's when you have a little desktop support technician runs in and they figure out whether it's the motherboard that needs to get swapped out or whether it's the power supply that needs to get swapped out, that type of thing. So the important thing that this is for like desktop support people, or where this can also be valuable for nowadays is for field technicians in technology industries that aren't kind of classic IT. So we have a lot of field technicians that are going out now that have to interact with computers, but their job really isn't computers. So this might be people like ISP installers. So if you work for Comcast or Quest or Verizon Fios, you're going out to connect houses up to the internet. You know, you connect the house up to the internet, you go to sit down at the computer, and then for some reason it's not connecting to the internet, and you might have to do some kind of a basic troubleshooting. Things like solar systems. So I had a client of mine who used to install solar systems into houses, and those solar systems now have computers that allow you to control everything with the solar system. And for sometimes that would break and there would be problems. So, and if you understand what RAM is, if you understand what the operating system is, if you understand how basic computers work, that can make your life a lot easier. So that's what the A+ is for. You're not going to be going into servers. You're not going to be going into networking. You're not going to be going into those really complicated areas. This is just for that basic maintenance and support of PCs, Linux boxes, and Mac boxes. Now you may be sitting there going, well, that sounds pretty good, Eli. That sounds pretty good. I think I want to be an A+ technician. You have sold me, Eli. I'm gonna go get certified CompTIA A+. And this is the point where I would say, hold your horses a second. Hold your horses a second. There is a big important concept that you have to realize and remember in the tech world is there is a difference between knowing a subject area and being certified in the subject area. And so a question that you're really going to have to ask yourself is it worth getting certified in a subject area? Because you can know the subject area. You can be good enough to get a job and do billable hours and the whole 9 yards without actually getting certified. So going out there and getting certified, it's going to take a lot of time and energy. People don't think about this, but like when I was going for my certifications way back when, about half the time I would spend getting the certification is what was required to learn the material. So when I was learning about Active Directory trusts and forests and all that kind of stuff in the MCSE world, it would take me about half the time to learn the material. So learn the material well enough in order to go out there and be able to deploy servers. That was half the time. The other half of the time was studying for the test. Realize when you go to get certified, you are going to have to take tests that are going to ask you about some really inane things. I mean, how many pins are on a P3 CPU? That type of thing. Nobody I know knows. Nobody I know cares. Right? You open up the desktop, you look at what socket's there, you're like, oh, it's that kind of socket. I'm going to shove in another CPU that corresponds to that kind of socket. How many pins are on that CPU? I don't know. It fits. That's all I care about. The CPU goes into that socket. That's all I care about. But the thing is, if you're going to go and get certified, how many pins are in DDR3 RAM? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I look, DDR3, look at the speeds, look at the other couple of specifications, shove the RAM chip in. That's all I worry about. So this is something that you're going to be having to think about. Is it good enough to know the material? And again, to be clear, to know it well enough to do a job versus actually getting the certificate. I would argue for most people, learn the material. Don't worry so much about the certificate because it's going to take you a lot of time to study. It's going to cost a decent amount of money to take the test because each of these tests actually does cost money. There's 2 tests and they both cost you money to take. And so for most people, I would say it's generally not worth getting certified in the A plus because again, it's not a requirement for anything else. You can learn the material and then move on. Who should get the A plus? You're sitting there like, well, I really like certifications. I would argue people like teenagers. Again, if you're 25, if you're 30 years old and you've got an A plus, it doesn't really matter. Again, back when I had my consulting company, back in 2008, 2009, honestly, if you came in with your A plus, and I literally had A plus people, certain new people certified in A plus, they would walk in my door and they would say, I am willing to work for free just for experience, and I would say, you cost too much money. Right? Free, again, in the real world, free isn't free because you have to deal with resources allocation and all that kind of stuff. And so I wouldn't even bring in free interns with the A plus certification. So the question is who should go for the A plus? I think A plus is good for teenagers. I'm not throwing this out as a joke. It's really true. As more and more teenagers get more interested in technology, if you have your A plus at 15, you get all the respect in the world from me. Because that shows as a 15 or a 16-year-old, as a teenager, you're that motivated to learn technology, and especially since you're a teenager, you don't have to pay the rent, you don't have to pay the mortgage off of this certification. If you can make 50, 100, 200 bucks a week off of your little A plus, right, to a 16-year-old, that's bank. To me, that's not a single bill. So I'd say people that are teenagers. I would think about teenagers or young folks. Some people for government contracts. Now again, remember, you have the private world and you have the government world. In the private world, most of the time you don't actually need a certification in order to do tech work. Basically, it's whether or not they trust you to do the work. That's the big question. In the government world, it's not so. A lot of times you need a specific certification to get a job. So if, let's say, you're coming out of the military or you're coming out of the college, you can get some kind of desktop support position with the government and all you need is an A plus, then by all means go out there and get the A plus, right? If that is actually, in fact, going to get you a job, truly going to get you a job, then go for it. Other folks that might want to get the A plus is if you're doing something like coding. So let's say you're with a startup company, you're generally a coder, but let's say your company is going to be building appliances. So a big thing in the startup world now is to sell appliances to customers where they write the custom code, they put that into a server, and then they sell that physical server. So think about things like IX systems or Barracuda. They actually sell you these systems. So if you're already a coder, right, you're already good with .NET or Java or something else, and you want to work with the hardware, doing something like getting an A plus certification, that might just be a nice cherry on the top of your sundae as far as a resume is concerned. Yes, I know coding, yes, I know software, but I also know hardware. That's something that might be able to help you get a job. But those are very specific instances, and so that's where I would have you really think about, do you really want to go through the time and energy to get an A plus? With any kind of certification that you're going to get, there is considered an amount of time you're supposed to be in a job in order to get that certification. So like the MCSE, a lot of people jump right into the MCSE and they don't realize you're supposed to have 5 years experience for the MCSE. True. With the A plus, there is still, it's not a requirement, to be clear. You don't have to have an experience. There's not an experience requirement. There's just a suggested amount of experience. And so with the A plus, the idea is this is supposed to prove that you have the equivalent of 12 months experience. So the idea is that this gives you the gold star. This gives you the stamp to say, yes, in fact, you have the equivalent of 1 year experience in the tech field. Do with that as you will. So in order to get the A plus, all you have to do is you have to pass 2 tests. So these are computer-based tests. There's no hands-on. You're not actually swapping hard drives in the test. Basically, you get to go into a testing center. You get to sit down in front of a computer. You have a timer that clicks down, and then you go through and you click all the selections in the multiple choice test, and you have to do that twice. So with it, whenever you see any kind of testing requirements, there'll usually be a number for the test code. And so with CompTIA A plus, it's 220-901 and 220-902. Those are the 2 tests that you're going to need to take. Now, it's very important that you take the right tests. Again, being a long-term technology professional, I've seen people screw up in all kinds of ways. And one of the ways I have seen people screw up is they literally just take the wrong test. They're not thinking about what they're doing, and they go out and they take some. Again, there's all these, when you go in there and you sign up with the testing center with what tests you're going to take, there's all these different tests. And I've seen where people actually study for the wrong test, and they even pass the wrong test, and that's just not the requirement for the certification that you're going for. So it's very important. This is one of those things. You check it once, you check it twice, you check it 3 times, and you make sure you're studying for the right test, and you take the right test. 220-901, 220-902. Those are the current tests that are required for the A+. It is important that you go to the CompTIA website when you're preparing for the test and actually make sure that these are still the tests that you need to take, and just fact check and verify. You check once, you check twice, you check 20 times, because it's shockingly easy. It's shockingly easy to mess that one up. So the 901 test, that is going to be focusing mainly on the hardware. So PC hardware, peripherals, mobile hardware, network hardware, and troubleshooting. So this is where we're going to be talking about the hardware, CPUs, RAM, power supplies, that type of stuff. That's going to be your 901 test. Your 902 test is going to be installing and configuring the operating systems. So being able to install and configure Windows, being able to deal with OS X, being able to deal with Linux, even iOS and Android at this point. So it's the software configurations and installations. That's what they're going to be dealing with in 902. So again, when you're going to be studying for these tests, remember there's a difference between learning the material and studying for the material. One of the ways that people really make a mistake is that they try to study all the material at once. So they study for 901 at the same time they're studying for 902. And again, that's just not efficient for studying for these tests. What you should do is you focus on the test that you're about to take. So you sit there and you spend a week and you hyper focus on 901. You put all that material in your brain, you pass the test, and then you flush all that material out of your brain, and then you focus on 902, right? There is overlap there. I mean, yeah, you do have to remember some from one test to the other, but basically by focusing on one test and then focusing on the next test, it's going to make your life a lot easier. The tests are up to 90 questions per exam, so with CompTIA A, they can change how the test is, but you'll have up to 90 questions, and you'll get 90 minutes for the exam. I'm one of those people, I would tell you to take all the time you need to take the test because, as we're going to talk about in a minute, these tests cost money. So with the tests, I was just taking a look. Like, again, if you go and you take a look at CompTIA A and you take a look at different places, there's like small variations in price for the test. It comes out to about $200. Like wherever you find the testing vouchers, it's got to be somewhere around $200. On CompTIA A, when I took a look a day ago to do the research for this, it was $211 per test. So again, this is what you have to be thinking about per CompTIA A right now. In order to get your A+ certifications, if you pass the first time, it will be $422. So there is real money involved, even if you self-study. Again, to understand, that's just for your testing certificate. That doesn't give you a book. That doesn't give you test. That doesn't give you study material. That doesn't give you anything else. That is just for the test alone. And if you fail, depending on what the current policy is, you may have to pay every time you go back and take the test. So with Microsoft now, I think they give you one one failure for free. I'm not sure with CompTIA A, especially this is one of those things. Whenever you're watching this particular video, go do your own research for this amount of time. But just put it in your head. Every time you take the test, it will cost you $200. So make sure you study for the test. Again, especially with some of those 15-year-olds, those 16-year-olds. Right? You go in there and you fail the test, it's gonna be an extra $200. You can take it as many times as you want. You can take it 500 times. CompTIA will keep taking your money, but every time you take it, it's got to be about another $200 in order to pass. The passing numbers aren't too bad. It is different between the 901 and the 902. 901, you have to get 675 points out of 900. So that's not too bad. To pass 902, you have to get 700 points out of 900. So that's pretty reasonable. Again, this is a pass-fail type thing. If you get 676 points for the 901, you pass. If you get 674 points, you fail. This is not A, B, C, D, E, F. Oh, I'll squeak by with a C minus. 674, you fail. 675, you pass. That's how it is. So these are some of the things you're going to have to be thinking about for the A+ requirements, and whether or not you're going to be taking the test. Now the question is how do you study for the A+? You can go out there and you can see there's a lot of people out there that are more than willing to charge you $2,000 in order to go through an A+ boot camp. And here's what I'll say. Unless you have $2,000 just burning a hole in your pocket, I would suggest you don't go. I paid for A+ training for my employees way back when. I sent them to the A+ training, and then every day I got to be very sad when I heard what they went through in the training. It was 5 days of me just every night groaning and saying, how much did I pay for you people to go through this? Why did I pay that much money? So I would suggest for most people that you simply self-study for the A+. Now, to be clear, this isn't the case with all certifications. Again, Microsoft certifications, Cisco, Juniper, there are other certifications where you need to get your hands on the hardware, or there's very specific things with a certification where having an in-person instructor is very helpful. The A+ really isn't that. This is the type of thing that you should be able to self-study on your own, and especially when you look at the cost differential. Again, if you self-study on your own, it's going to be a few $100. Plus, you'll probably buy your own computer to play with that you'll get to keep afterwards. Versus, again, something like $2,000 in order to go for a boot camp. The first thing that you should do is you should go out and you should get a book. Again, even if you're following this track, you should still get a book. FTC compliance, these people aren't paying me anything. This guy, though, Mike Myers, again, FTC compliance, they did Total Sim. I guess his company did sponsor Eli, the computer guy, like way back when, like 2 or 3 years ago. So that is true. But at this point, they're not paying me at all. I don't get a dime if you buy this book. But this is kind of like the Bible. Like there are certain Bibles and industries, and this all-in-one is basically the Bible for the A+ certification. And I really don't see how you're going to go wrong with it. It cost me. I picked this one up at Barnes & Noble yesterday. It cost me about $60. So again, this gives you all the material, and it's a big book. I mean, this is a real big book, and it gives you a whole bunch of information here. It also gives you some practice tests and that kind of thing. So this is what I would say that you should go for. Go out and definitely pick up a study guide one way or the other, because it's just the books are good, because it just gives you specific stuff that is just very difficult for me to go over in some of these classes. I mean, specific configurations, you're able to highlight, you're able to mark pages, all of that kind of thing. Now, if you do go out and buy a book, especially if you're like Eli, only Eli would be stupid enough to go to Barnes & Noble and pay full price. I'm going to go to Amazon.com and get it for half price. To be clear, be very careful. Be very careful on what version you get. Where does it say? It says it on this one somewhere. There we go. See how this says 9th edition? So as I video this, 9th edition is the current version of this book. But that means there's been 8 other versions. So some of you folks would be like, who would be stupid enough to go out there and spend full price on a book? I'm going to go to Amazon. and you buy the 5th edition for 20 bucks. That's just not going to work for you. Again, A plus, the technology doesn't change nearly as quickly as you think it does. And so what to think, what to realize with these books is if you do not plan to take the A plus, if you're just learning the material, by all means, grab the 8th edition, grab the 7th edition, save yourself 20 bucks, right? If you're just learning the material, 7th or 8th edition is probably fine. If you're studying to take the test, make sure you get the right edition. Again, let's just say stupid things that people do, and I know from experience. Look at all the money I saved buying books that are worthless. But yeah, this is the CompTIA A Plus all-in-one by this guy Mike Myers. Now beyond that, I would tell you to go out to your local computer store if you have it. In this area, we have Micro Center. I would argue you should try to go to a brick and mortar store in order to buy computer parts. So if you're going to be learning the A plus anyway, you might as well actually learn and build your own computer. Right? So actually go out, buy a computer case, buy a motherboard, buy the RAM, buy all that kind of stuff. Now, why I say you should try to go to a brick and mortar store, at this point, if you're studying for the A plus, a brick and mortar store, is because building a computer is very paint by numbers, where basically you look at the motherboard, you look at the form factor, you look at the power requirements, and then based on that, you buy a specific power supply, you buy a specific case, and then you buy a specific RAM, and then you do all this, right? So it's very plug and play. Here's the thing. If you know how to read all the specifications, building or assembling a computer PC is very easy. It's very plug and play, especially since you're new. I am gonna bet you $100 you're going to misread some specification, and then you're going to end up buying the wrong thing. You're gonna buy the wrong RAM. You're gonna buy the wrong this. You're gonna buy the wrong that. Again, when you assemble a PC, I mean, you've got the case, you've got the motherboard, you've got the power supply, you've got the RAM, you've got the CPU, you've got the heatsink for the CPU, you've got the thermal compound, you've got the storage, whether you do solid state drive or blah blah. Right? So you have to buy at least 10 different components to build a PC, and everybody screws up, at least in the beginning. The nice part is if you go to a normal brick and mortar store, you buy the wrong RAM, then it's just very easy to return it and buy the right one. Or if you have some place like Micro Center, again, I don't get paid, but Micro Center is a good place. You can go to Micro Center and you can just have them verify that you're buying the right thing. So I'd have you think about doing that for your first computer versus Newegg or Amazon. Now, to be clear, when you know what you're doing and you want to assemble computers for the best price, go to I think Newegg is the best. Newegg is definitely the best. But again, that's one of those, once you feel comfortable, then do that. In the beginning, it's worth those extra couple of bucks to be able to go to a brick and mortar store, and more importantly, be able to return, the things that you don't actually need, the things that you mistakenly purchased. Then past that, when you're going to start doing things like installing software, one of the things that I would highly recommend is install trial software. Do not install pirated software. So this is big, especially you got to go out. You're going to be learning how to install the Windows operating system. There are trial versions of the Windows operating system you can download from Microsoft. I forget what I think they're 180-day versions. So they give you a nice long time in order to be able to use it, and then it fails after that. But why I tell you to use trial software versus pirated software is especially when you're learning how all this stuff works, you're not really sure what they did to that pirated software. You know what I'm saying? Like, so the hackers went in and they ripped out the whole activation procedure, right? Oh, that makes sense, right? Okay, yeah, so I don't have to activate the software. But while they were ripping out that activation software or component, you have no idea if they installed viruses, if they installed malware, if they installed just weird, stupid little configurations that you wouldn't think about. Again, I mean, I would argue now I wouldn't do pirated software ever. But like, once you know what you're doing and once you feel comfortable, you download pirated software, you know how things are supposed to work, then it's pretty easy to to make it work. When you're learning how this stuff is supposed to operate, having software, having operating systems that have been non-vendor modified can end up teaching you some very bad things, and then will cause you problems going into the future. So that's where I would say stay with the trial stuff. There's enough. Again, you can download Linux for free at this point from anywhere. Microsoft, almost every single Microsoft product has. There's trial software. Almost everything. There's at least a 7-day trial of. So I would download the trial software, play with that, and then go from there versus the pirated stuff. Because again, look, I'm not trying to be an old guy. I'm not trying to be an old guy raining on your parade. I've been doing this for a while. I'm doing this for a while. Oh, as they say, no, nothing is free. Nothing is free. You always pay somehow. And again, with the pirated software, you will pay. You will pay. It may not be in cash. It may not be in crash. It may not be in credit card right at this point, but you will pay for it. So right when you're learning how to do stuff, stick with the trial software. So we've talked about what the A plus is. We've talked about who should go for the A plus. We've talked about the A plus requirements, so on and so forth. So now the question is what is the Eli, the computer guy track for A plus going to be like? Is this all you need? Because that's what people really want. They're like, Eli, why am I going to spend $60 in a book when I can just watch your material for a lot less? And the fact of the matter is this track is not going to be good enough for you to pass the test. I'm not even trying. This isn't me hedging my bets. This isn't me covering my ass. I'm not even trying to go there. Again, when you're going to go for the A plus test, I've actually, like back in the day when companies were still coming to me, when I didn't quite have the reputation I do have now, and companies were coming to me to hire me in order to do training curriculums, I had companies come to me and be willing to pay me a whole lot of money in order to do a real diligent A plus track. And I basically told them no way in hell. The reason is because when you get into the real A plus, and when you get into the A plus in order to pass the test, it gets so esoteric and it gets so stupid and it gets just down to little nuance and little specifics on things I just can't even pretend to care about, right? So with this track, this is not the end all be all prep for the A plus. Basically, what I'm trying to do with this track, that I'm creating is to get you to the level of somebody with what is expected of an A plus knowledge base. So you should know the difference between an ARM processor and an x86 processor. You should know the differences in RAM. You should understand the differences in solid state drives versus platter drives. You should understand power supplies. You should understand how to assemble a computer. You should understand the different variations of Bluetooth. Basically, what I am trying to give you here in this A plus track is if I was going to be hiring a desktop technician, what do I actually expect that desktop technician to know? I don't care if they know how many pins are in a particular CPU. It just doesn't matter. So that's what we're going to be doing with this track. We're going to be going over, I mean, the important subjects, again, the important things, but we're just not going to get into that little esoteric minutia. And so it's very important to understand that this will not be enough to pass the A plus alone. And again, I would argue whether it's this particular study guide or another study guide, I would tell you to pick up a book. If nothing else, having a book like this is just very good to be able to cross-reference information that I say, and again, to get into some of the minutia that I just have no interest in getting in. And so that's all there is to say for this introduction to the A plus track. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited about it. Get to talk about a lot of these interesting components and basically how computers work and such, and be able to teach you to that too. I would argue, again, to be clear, my personal opinion, my 2 cents, is that I would learn the material for the A plus if you're a new person trying to go in the IT or the technical world. Learning the material for the A plus is very valuable. You will not go wrong by learning A plus material. Whether you actually get certified, that's a question that you're going to have to answer, And generally, honestly, I tell most people no. You're going to be spending over $400 just to take the test if you pass the test outright. And then again, in order to get good enough to actually pass the test, you're going to have to study very hard. Again, there's the time to learn the material and then actually studying and test prepping and all that for the material. I don't think that's really worthwhile. And really, again, A plus is the very bottom or one of the very bottom rungs in the IT field. And so this is the kind of job that generally, unless you're going into the government world, that you can simply get based off of a smile and swapping hard drives for your grandma or your parents or that type of thing. Really, honestly, getting a desktop support position job, it really is. It's about who you know. It's about who you suck up to. It's about whether people actually want to work with you or not. Even if you don't know very much about technology or IT, you can be trained on the job rather easily for these positions. And so actually getting certified in A plus, again, just my 2 cents. I know this seems weird. I know this seems weird. Like, hey, look, we're starting the A plus track. And I would not get the certification. But hey, I'm always honest with you folks. The other reason I want to get the A plus is most of the time when you're going for jobs, what you'll see is even if they say they require the A plus, they require the A plus. Normally they'll say the A plus or equivalent, right? So they basically just put A plus in there as a placeholder. Well, the thing is with there's the Microsoft certification called the MCSA, and I was taking a look for the MCSA, doing research here, and you can get the MCSA for Windows 10, and it also only takes 2 tests. So the MCSA for Windows 10 is going to really, again, it's not vendor neutral. It's very specific on Windows 10, but it is going to be a very deep dive onto the Windows 10 operating system. And I would argue that would be far more valuable to employers than the A plus. If I'm sitting there, you got one person with an A plus, and you have another person with an MCSA, it's not even a question mark. The MCSA definitely outranks the A plus. I mean, just hands down. And so if both of the certifications only take 2 tests, and again, if you go for the Windows 10, it's still going to be rather basic. I mean, it's going to be more complicated than the A plus, but it's still going to be pretty simple. I would argue that you go for that MCSA. The MCSA, it'll probably take you a little bit longer to study for, especially if you're new, especially if you learn all the A plus stuff first. But I think you'll be far better off going for that MCSA for the Windows 10. There's also a few different MCSAs out there. You can take a look at those. Many times you can use those tests as tests for the MCSE2. So I would go down that Microsoft certification track before I bothered with the A plus and even the Net plus, at least as far as the certification is concerned. And so those are my thoughts. Those are my final thoughts here for the A plus introduction. So we're gonna go in. We're gonna rip into computers. We're gonna be talking about power supplies and motherboards and operating systems and all of that kind of stuff down at the basic level. And yeah, I'll be curious to see how many classes are in this track. It's probably gonna be quite a few classes. Probably at the end of the day, it'll probably be 30 or 40 classes. But we'll see. We'll see. I have no idea. So, as always, I enjoyed teaching this class and look forward to seeing you at the next one.